It was a late Sunday afternoon when Emma, her husband Jack, and their daughter Lily drove up to the family cabin. Emma had grown up coming here, and she always found a sense of comfort in its wooden walls and cozy fireplace. But today, there was an uneasiness hanging in the air. Jack sensed it too. He glanced at Emma, who was staring out the window, her fingers nervously tapping on her knee. "You okay?" Jack asked, his voice filled with concern. Emma gave a weak smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking about what's to come." She didn't need to elaborate. Jack knew she was talking about her mother, Helen, who had invited them to the cabin for the weekend. An invitation from Helen was never just about spending quality family time. It always came with hidden intentions and unspoken expectations. When they pulled up to the cabin, Helen was already outside, waiting for them. She was wearing her usual attire, a perfectly ironed blouse, and an expression that gave away little. As Emma stepped out of the car, Helen greeted her with a cool embrace, then quickly turned her attention to Lily. "Oh, there's my beautiful granddaughter," Helen said with enthusiasm, pulling Lily into her arms. Lily smiled politely, but Emma could see the slight discomfort in her daughter's eyes. Helen's love always felt like it came with strings attached. They all went inside, and Helen directed them to the living room. She had prepared tea, and the smell of freshly baked scones wafted through the house. The fireplace crackled, creating an illusion of warmth that didn't quite match the tension in the room. Jack and Emma exchanged glances, both trying to gauge Helen's mood and the reason behind this unexpected invitation. After everyone had settled down, Helen looked at Emma, her eyes sharp. "Emma, dear, we have some family matters to discuss," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Emma's stomach tightened. She had been expecting this, but hearing the words aloud made her nerves tingle. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat, leaning slightly toward Emma in a show of support. "What kind of family matters?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. Helen's lips formed a thin smile. "Oh, it's about the inheritance," she said, her eyes narrowing on Emma. "You know, it's time we address who will be taking care of the estate once I'm gone." Emma felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The inheritance, the family estate, the cabin, and everything that had been in the family for generations. She had known this conversation was inevitable, but she hadn't expected it to come up so suddenly. She looked at Jack, who nodded at her to continue. "Mom, we can talk about this later," Emma said, trying to diffuse the tension. But Helen wasn't having it. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Emma's. "No, we will talk about it now," she insisted. "I need to know that what I've worked for will be handled properly, and frankly, Emma, I'm not sure you're capable." Emma's face flushed. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jack reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Helen sighed, as if disappointed. "You have a lot on your plate, dear, with your work and Lily. I just think it might be better if someone else, someone more responsible, took charge." Emma felt her heart pound in her chest. She had always known her mother didn't think much of her abilities, but hearing it said out loud in front of Jack and Lily cut her deeply. She opened her mouth to argue, but Jack spoke first. "Helen, Emma is more than capable of managing anything you leave behind," he said firmly. "You don't need to doubt her." Helen raised an eyebrow, her gaze shifting to Jack. "I appreciate your loyalty, Jack, but this is a family matter," she said coldly. "And it's not just about responsibility, it's about trust." Emma's breath caught. Trust. That word hung heavy in the air, and she knew exactly what her mother was implying. Years ago, Emma had made a mistake that Helen had never forgiven, never let go of. Emma's eyes watered as she looked down, her past mistakes rushing back in her mind like a tidal wave. "Mom, that was years ago," Emma said softly. "I've moved past it, and I've done everything I can to prove myself since then." Helen shook her head, her eyes hard. "Some mistakes are not so easily forgotten, Emma. And this isn't just about you. It's about the entire family, about Lily and her future." Emma swallowed hard, her throat tightening. She looked at Jack, who nodded encouragingly. "We can make this work," Jack said, his voice steady. Emma's proven herself time and time again, and we both want what's best for Lily. Helen didn't respond right away. She simply stared at Emma, her eyes searching, as if trying to see through her. The silence stretched on, the crackling of the fireplace the only sound breaking the tension. Finally, Helen sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I suppose we'll see," she said, her voice softer but still laced with doubt. "But understand this, Emma. If you're to have any part of the inheritance, I need to be sure, completely sure, that you're ready to take on that responsibility." Emma nodded, her heart heavy. "I understand, Mom," she said quietly. "I'll do whatever it takes." The conversation ended, but the tension remained. Jack suggested they take a walk, and Emma gratefully agreed. They left the cabin, Lily running ahead of them down the familiar path that led to the lake. Emma took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air, trying to shake off the conversation with her mother. Jack slipped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You okay?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, though tears welled up in her eyes. I thought maybe she'd finally moved on," she said, her voice breaking. "But she hasn't. She'll never forgive me." Jack stopped, turning to face her. He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes filled with love. "Hey, listen to me," he said gently. "You're not defined by your past mistakes. You're an amazing wife, an incredible mother, and you deserve everything good in this world. Don't let her make you feel otherwise." Emma blinked back tears, leaning into Jack's touch. "Thank you," she whispered, her heart swelling with love for him. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Jack smiled. "You'd be just fine, but lucky for you, you don't have to find out." He leaned in and kissed her forehead, and Emma felt a small weight lift from her shoulders. They continued down the path, the sounds of the forest surrounding them. When they reached the lake, Lily was already at the edge, tossing stones into the water and watching the ripples spread out. Emma watched her daughter, a sense of protectiveness washing over her. She would do whatever it took to ensure Lily had a bright future, no matter what her mother thought. As they stood there, the sun setting behind the mountains, Emma knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But she wasn't alone. She had Jack, and she had Lily, and that was all she needed. She would prove herself, not to her mother, but to herself. And maybe, just maybe, one day Helen would see that too. Back at the cabin, Helen watched from the window as Emma, Jack, and Lily stood by the lake. She sighed, a mix of emotions swirling within her. She wanted to trust Emma, to believe that her daughter was ready to take on the responsibility of the family estate. But the past had a way of haunting her, and the fear of history repeating itself kept her from letting go. Helen turned away from the window, her heart heavy. She loved her daughter, but love didn't erase the pain of betrayal. And until Emma could prove herself beyond a shadow of a doubt, Helen knew she couldn't hand over everything she had worked for. Not yet. The rest of the evening was filled with forced smiles and polite conversation. Helen tried to keep things light, asking Lily about school and complimenting Jack on his work. But underneath it all, the tension remained, an unspoken reminder of the conversation they had earlier. When it was time for bed, Emma and Jack settled into the small guest room, the walls covered in old photographs of Emma as a child. Jack could tell Emma was still upset, her eyes distant as she stared at the ceiling. "You want to talk about it?" Jack asked softly. Emma shook her head. "Not tonight. I just want to sleep and forget about it for a little while." Jack nodded, wrapping his arm around her and pulling her close. "Okay, just remember, I'm here. We'll get through this together." Emma closed her eyes, letting herself relax into Jack's embrace. She knew he was right. They would get through this, no matter what her mother threw at them. She had made mistakes, but she had also worked hard to make up for them. And she wouldn't let anyone, not even her mother, take away what she had built with Jack and Lily. The next morning, Emma woke up early, the sun just beginning to rise over the mountains. She slipped out of bed quietly, not wanting to wake Jack, She needed some time to herself, to think. She made her way to the kitchen where she found Helen already up, sipping her coffee at the table. Helen looked up as Emma entered, her expression unreadable. "Good morning," she said, her tone neutral. Emma nodded. "Morning," she replied, pouring herself a cup of coffee and sitting down across from her mother. The silence between them was thick, both of them unsure how to bridge the gap that had formed over the years. After a few moments, Helen spoke. "Emma, I want you to understand something," she began, her voice softer than it had been the day before. "It's not that I don't love you, I do. But the decisions I make, they're not just about you. They're about the entire family, about protecting what your father and I built." Emma looked down at her coffee, her heart aching. "I know, Mom," she said quietly. "But I've changed. I'm not the same person I was back then. I've worked hard to prove myself, to be someone Lily can be proud of." Helen sighed, her eyes softening. "I see that, Emma. I do. But it's hard for me to let go of the past. I want to trust you, but it's not easy." Emma swallowed, her eyes meeting her mother's. "I don't expect it to be easy. I just want a chance to show you that I can do this, that I can take care of the family and the estate." Helen was silent for a long moment, her gaze locked on Emma's. Finally, she nodded. "All right, I'll give you that chance. But understand, Emma, this is your last opportunity. If you make another mistake, I won't be able to forgive it." Emma nodded, her heart pounding. "I understand, and I won't let you down." Helen reached across the table, placing her hand over Emma's. It was the first time in a long time that Emma felt a real connection with her mother, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better between them. As the day went on, there was a subtle shift in the air. The tension that had hung over them since their arrival seemed to lighten, and for the first time, Emma felt like they were moving forward. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be more challenges ahead, but Emma was ready to face them. She had her family by her side, and that was all she needed. Later that day, as they packed up to leave the cabin, Helen hugged Emma tightly, something she hadn't done in years. "Take care of yourself and take care of Lily," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Emma hugged her mother back, tears stinging her eyes. "I will, Mom. I promise." As they drove away from the cabin, Emma looked back at the place that held so many memories, some good, some painful. She knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but she was ready. For Jack, for Lily, and for herself, she would face whatever came her way. And maybe, just maybe, one day her mother would see her for who she truly was, not defined by her past mistakes, but by the strength she had found in overcoming them.